Welcome along to Rugby League Back Chat. We're here at the Arc in Headingley, and joining us for this edition of a feisty Rugby League debate, we have Chris Irvine from The Times, the Daily Mirror's correspondent Gareth Walker, and the League Express editor Martyn Sadler joins us also. It's been a week, I think, when the off-field headlines have been bigger than the on-field headlines in the world of Rugby League, particularly the name of Zach Hardacker, Martin, who we know that he was suspended and then sacked by Casper Tigers for taking cocaine just before the grand final, where he missed that grand final against Leeds Rhinos. This week he has been banned for 14 months, getting the ban reduced due to mitigating circumstances, medical evidence and various other reasons, including that he didn't intend to take it for any performance-enhancing reasons. What have you made of the case? Just to say before we say that, it is pretty complex, so if people want to read the verdict and the judgment is on the UCAD website, isn't it? And it's quite informative to go through it. But give us your thoughts, Martin.
Well, I'm glad that Zach is going to be back, you know, by the end of the season. I mean, everybody's now assuming that he's going to sign for Wigan and will be signing in time for a pre-season with them. Obviously, too late for him to do anything this season.
And just to stress that the 14-month ban starts from when the test took place, which was in September 2017.
Yeah, and ends on November the 7th,
That's right,
I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's great news for Zach personally, because, you know, other players have been suspended for longer, and there was even the potential for a 4-year suspension, I believe, if the worst had come to the worst. It's a complex judgment. It's quite a disturbing judgment in a way as well, when you read and you look and see what was in Zach's mind and the way that he reacted. Not just, I mean, the cocaine seems to be almost the least of his problems, actually, because, you know, the amount of alcohol that he apparently took on that occasion, he was feeling very depressed and unhappy about a personal, you know, the personal anniversary of a particularly tragic incident, and I think those were the mitigating circumstances. But, you know, he's obviously a pretty vulnerable individual. I think Zach's a lovely guy. When you speak to him and meet him and so on, you couldn't meet a nicer kid. But he's like a few people that, you know, when they get out, they get with their mates, perhaps their mates lead them astray and so on. And, you know, his tolerance of, you know, some of the bad things in life, whether it's drugs, alcohol or whatever, is probably not very great. Yeah. So, but, you know, the thing he does best is play rugby league, and I don't like to see, if a player hasn't been found guilty of cheating, which I don't think you could say Zach was.
Well, there's no suggestion he was cheating. No suggestion whatsoever he was trying to cheat.
And I just don't like to see somebody being prevented from earning a living for 2 years or more.
Okay, so the other side of that coin, Chris, is that people will say, well, hang on a minute. Hardacre's got a charge list as long as your arm. It's not just this incident, it's endless other incidents involving alcohol. There was the homophobic abuse case he got banned for. There was an assault case. I mean, endless things. He's had umpteen chances. It's an absolute farce. This verdict is lily-livered and weak, and he should have got a longer ban. That isn't an uncommon view amongst rugby league supporters.
Sadly not.
Is it a fair view?
I think there are merits in that, but the UK anti-doping could only take into recognition the facts of this particular case. And the facts of this particular case, as Martin alluded to, are really disturbing. There's one line in the report, and it's a lengthy 14-page report. It talks about the amount of alcohol he took. It's 2 days before a Super 8 game, bear in mind, against Leeds. He drinks 6 to 7 pints of lager, he drinks half a litre of whiskey, and he drinks half a litre of vodka, and that time takes 4 or 5 lines of cocaine. And in the judgment, it actually said if he'd gone on to drink even more, that he possibly wouldn't be with us. The implication is he would have died. And that is the most disturbing element of the report, that he would have died. And I find it disturbing that the amount of alcohol is extraordinary.
It is.
It's extraordinary. And it's 2 days before a vital game against Leeds. So in his mind, I don't know what's going on in Zach's mind. In there's the talk about, you know, he goes to see a psychiatrist who diagnosed him with a specific condition in 2015, which in the report is redacted. It doesn't take a genius to look at the actual, you know, to look into that further. Some very, very disturbing things within that report. Yeah. And
I think he clearly needs help, doesn't he? And,
he does,
you know, This isn't the first one. Earlier this year, Gareth, Ryan Bailey, who refused to give a sample for a test, he was able to produce medical and psychiatric evidence which meant there was no fault or negligence in his actions to the drug testers, and he was exonerated completely and didn't get a ban at all. We've got Thomas Minns, obviously, has admitted taking cocaine. Is there a worrying trend, Chris, talking about the alcohol there? Is there a worrying trend generally about Super League players? We've talked in the past about sleepers and those kind of drugs as well. Is there a worrying trend? Should the game be worried?
I mean, Gareth Carvell, the Rugby League Players Association representative, spoke a bit about this last week, and I do agree with him that this is a society thing. It's not specifically a Rugby League thing. However, there have been a number of cases in Rugby League at the moment. To me, if the Hardacker thing and Ryan Bailey has shown us anything, they're all almost unique, aren't they? You know, we did get a lot of detail about Zach Hardacker's case, but even then we don't know the full story because some of it's taken out with the exact medical diagnosis.
Yeah.
His legal team talked about a personal trauma. You know, we don't know exactly what that is. And it's different for other people, different for Ryan Bailey, different for Jake Livermore in football. That was another kind of landmark case, wasn't it, in sport?
That was an FA judgment rather than UCAD, yeah.
A different situation again. So these are all different situations, and UCAD are obviously looking at them on their own merits with each specific legal team.
But I do think there's a significant distinction between taking a stimulant such as cocaine and taking a performance-enhancing drug. I'm never sure that there's a sufficient distinction drawn between the two, Rod, if I'm really honest about it.
Technically speaking, having cocaine in your system is not an illegal act, nor is drinking umpteen pints of lager.
But the point is, it's not, you're right.
So should anyone be worried? I mean, the only reason Zach Hardacker's been charged with that is because it's deemed to be a performance-enhancing drug, and he took it in competition. If he'd taken it out of competition, and he could drink himself insensible out of competition and take cocaine out of competition, there would be no ban. And there would be no offence committed either.
But the thing is, the cocaine leaves the system within 48 hours. Yeah. He could have done it a day before and probably been okay.
Sure.
And that's a problem. But I think it is a societal problem. But also, rugby league players and professional sportsmen and women are subject to a lot of advice and all the rest of it. You take the advice of, well, these are professional sports people, and surely they should be doing exactly the right thing. And in this case, they're not.
You've got to hope now that this is the turning point for Zach Hardacker. I know he's listed things in the back, but this surely now has to be his chance. If he does go to Wigan,
he's turned over more leads than Autumn Gale, though, and you would really hope so, wouldn't you?
I mean, when you referred to that medical report saying that this time, you know, if he'd carried on drinking, the consequences could have been fatal. You know, hopefully that now has to register. A move to a different club, maybe in a different area, away. Who knows from this group of friends.
He did move to Australia, and then he moved to a different. So that's couldn't be much
for
more
a
of a different area.
I did.
But that probably wasn't a great move because I mean, you go somewhere where you don't know anybody, and that makes life difficult anyway, doesn't it? I suppose.
Okay.
What exaggerates the Hardacker case is what's so frustrating is we just know what a great player he is.
In fact, that's
you know, he really has got
obviously
the
know that,
and Castle would know that without him.
Just a couple of quick things on this. I mean, Hardacker, he apologised at the time when he tested positive. I'd like to apologise to the Castleford Tigers staff and fans. Enormous error of judgment. I truly apologise. So he showed contrition. He apologised. The club disciplined him. The club sacked him. He'll end up somewhere else. There are other things going around here because there's legal precedent when Chelsea, people might remember, sacked Adrian Mutu in 2004 for taking cocaine. He ended up playing at Juventus and Fiorentina, and Chelsea sued Mutu. They tried to sue the clubs and failed, but they sued Mutu, and the Court for Arbitration for Sport judged that they were entitled to their transfer fee back off Mutu and any signing-on fees. And there's been other cases in America involving Michael Vick and various people. But do you think that when he, as we expect, goes to Wigan, that Wigan or Hardacker are going to end up paying Castleford some compensation?
Well, I understand that when Hardacker left Leeds for Castleford, there was a significant transfer fee.
They'll want that back.
And of course, but if Castleford, you know, sacked him legally, then he's obviously no longer there playing. With them. Are they entitled to?
Yeah, well, the Mutu case, they sacked Mutu, and then he signed subsequently for Juventus.
I suppose. I mean, does the RFL still hold?
Well, they can stop him playing,
Do they still hold the registration with Castleford? Because if that's the case...
It's a well, he's not really registered yet. Yeah, so
Castleford have been the big losers in this, haven't they? They lost their star player.
They lost the grand final, didn't they?
And they lost, and in different circumstances, but shades of Denny Solomona suddenly, you know...
The other thing as well, and this was the point made by Hardacker himself in the run-up to the final and all the rest of it, because he was playing until 2 days before the game. Just how great Castleford had been with him. He sang the praises of Darryl Powell and how he'd been looked after and all the rest of it. And this is unfortunately the consequence.
Yeah.
And Castleford haven't been the same since.
No, they haven't.
That's the point.
Let's look at Albert Kelly, because I was mentioned there'd been a lot of a week of headlines of off the field. The Albert Kelly incident, people are familiar with it. A video doing the rounds on social media of Kelly using some pretty unpleasant, vile language at a young woman in a restaurant. Yeah. Now, Hull took a completely different tack here. They did not, well, I can't say they did nothing, they said nothing, and they wouldn't comment on anything. Kelly hasn't been cited since, apart from on the field, and there's no sign of him apologising publicly, at least. Was that a case of there's a right way to do something and a wrong way, and that was the wrong way?
I think Hull could have stopped a lot of criticism if they'd just come out and been more clear and said, even if they'd just said, look, we have dealt with this internally, whether Kelly has apologised to the family or the girl, if they made that clear and made his apology clear and said we dealt with it, I think they would have got away from a lot of criticism. Just say what you need to say, make the stance clear, and then be quiet about it. But by not saying anything, it did leave them open to a lot of criticism.
Should Kelly, if this was in Australia, Kelly would have been wheeled out in front of a camera and told to apologise?
Well, not just that. It would have been up against the NRL integrity unit, wouldn't he? And he may well have found himself.
But why didn't he make an headlines here? Because you're all newspaper guys, but it didn't. There was almost no coverage of it.
Well, in these situations, I'll just explain how it works on a national paper for me personally. So when something like this comes up, I will tell my sports desk about the story. Yeah. They will decide then that it's a news story. This is not something that's related to being on the field, unless Hull suspended him, in which case it might come under my remit. So then it goes to the news desk, and they have to decide, based on a number of things, what Kelly's done, his profile around the country, which is a difference to Australia, obviously,
clearly,
on whether they want to run that news story. And the majority of newspapers decided.
Well, he's got a profile in Hull, hasn't he? They didn't seem to be too interested in covering the story either.
It seemed odd at the time, but nothing was said. But the new way of communicating rugby league is not to communicate.
Yes. Well, we actually made contact with the club, with James Clark, the Hull chief executive. Well, they said that we've taken action. We've already spoken to Albert Kelly. We reported this in our newspaper, but we're not saying anything about it publicly, and that's that.
Yeah. But the point is,
the thing is, when you say was that the right approach, it has died away since then. But it has died away, but with a lot of criticism.
Well, good for Hull, but probably not for the game, because the integrity of the game is once again besmirched, isn't it?
Well, now bear in mind that the rugby league themselves have made no comment on it either, whereas the NRL would have done.
There's a difference, Rod, isn't it?
The NRL would have done.
They would, yes.
Yeah, but the NRL would have done. They would have made an example of him, and something would have happened. And again, he's somebody with some form, unfortunately.
Yeah. But nobody has explained, as far as I'm aware, the context in which that video was made, because somebody was clearly, filming Albert Kelly.
That's right.
He clearly looked under the weather. He looked as though he had something to drink, whatever one imagines he might have done. But who was filming him, and why were they filming him, and who was he being provoked in some way? None of us know that, do we?
We don't know that, but what we do know is that there are a segment of rugby league supporters prepared to defend anybody and anything that someone does, as long as they're currently employed by the rugby league club they support.
But on the other hand,
what has largely happened in this situation.
But on the other hand, there are some fans who will take the opposite view and demand that somebody gets their head chopped off no matter what.
Could this all be self-policing? Because the clubs can decide who they employ and don't employ. I'll just read a list of clubs that have employed at some point recently, or do employ players that have been involved in something antisocial, or been arrested or charged or convicted of offences. St Helens, Wigan, Warrington, Castleford, Leeds, Hull, Wakefield, Salford, Widnes, Hull KR, Catalans and Huddersfield. So all those clubs have at some point in the recent past. So what I'm saying is the clubs can police this themselves. We don't need us to start ranting and raving about it. They can police it themselves. But what we do know is they'll keep employing these people as long as they can do a job on the field.
No, but the fact is that rugby league is played in the main by working class kids, who don't necessarily always behave like the Queen,
Well, young men do misbehave.
Yes,
Martyn,
of course
I'm sure we can all remember that in our distant past.
They do.
It's a different environment now, isn't it? This is another society-wide thing, that camera phones and social media and things like that. Yeah. These things have gone on, I'm sure, down the years, and they're now being thrust into the public domain.
That's absolutely right.
And the clubs need to find a way to deal with it better.
Well,
perhaps.
Yeah, but a lot of younger people love listening to various forms of music, and look at the way some musicians behave. You know, if you actually banned them every time they were...
It's a society.
If you suspended rock
cocaine.
bands for misbehaviour, there wouldn't be very much
any
music
left.
being presented.
No, indeed.
Who's chucked any TVs out of windows recently in rugby league?
But is it a complete fallacy and a nonsense to say that sportsmen should be role models? Parents should be role models, shouldn't they? Not sportsmen. These are young men whose job is to win rugby league matches. Their job is not to go out and sort of say this is how to live your life, is it? Are we being completely silly here to even suggest that?
We appoint them role models, don't we? They're not appointed themselves.
No.
We look at young kids look up to people like Albert Kelly, look up to people like Zach Hardacker, and they see them behaving that way, and it kind of, you know, if I was a kid, it kind of ruins the legend.
But to me, again, that goes wider than rugby league, and you'll have good teachers and bad teachers. You look at somebody like Kevin Sinfield, and you say you'd probably like your children to see him as a role model. So.
Well, I've been watching rugby league for probably longer than most of you, I guess, and you know, throughout my life, there have been great players whose behaviour off the field has often been, you know, pretty questionable, but they've still been great players. And most people are intelligent enough to realise that, you know, when Alex Murphy, you know, did something crazy, which he would do occasionally, but he was still brilliant and a genius on the field.
But I think you're right there, Martin, because streaks of genius usually come with streaks of craziness.
Right,
yeah, of course they do.
Well, we'll be back with more craziness and more geniuses in a couple of minutes. I'm going to start talking about referees. They've been under the microscope as ever in the last week, and we'll be talking about that in the next part of Rugby League Back Chat. Welcome back to Rugby League Back Chat, coming from the Arc here in Headingley. Let's talk about referees. Everyone seems to be talking about referees all the time. I don't know why, Chris. Rugby League referees, are they that bad? Really?
No. I think they just get a hard time because, I mean, social media just seems to be the kind of port for fans to vent their fury. I think they're far too much in terms of television commentaries. There's far too much talked about referees. I think generally they're doing the best job that they can. I think there's some good individuals doing their very best. I think they have integrity, and that's what's being called into question most of the time. Yeah. I think they have integrity. I think that they're generally well coached. There have been some strains because of injuries and departures and all the rest of it.
They're generally fit, aren't they?
They're fit. They're fitter than they've ever been. The problem is, part of the problem is, you see in the NRL there's 2 referees and there's every facility given. You know, we have video referees all then there's a level playing field. There isn't in Super League. Yeah. So there's too much emphasis put on the referees. And you'll get it, we'll be in press boxes then, and you'll see people come out, oh, you need to write about the referees. No, we don't. It's boring, really. I think they do a good job, generally.
Well, I actually listed 10 things that I don't like about Rugby League in our newspaper this week, and an excessive focus on referees was one of them. Yeah. So this is a bad part of the show for me, I guess. But, you know, it's I agree with everything that Chris has said. You know, again, you know, the difference now compared to, say, 30 or 40 years ago is that so many games weren't on television and not televised at all. Yeah. So any referee, any mistake a referee makes now is immediately shown on television. It goes viral on the internet.
And the television pictures are so much more sophisticated, and of course, with many more camera angles now.
Exactly, and the other side of that coin is that every single fan in the world now has the means to, you know, abuse a referee on social media. So those 2 things were both lacking 40 years ago. Yes. And you got referees like Eric Clay, for example, Billy Thompson, who quite frankly, were certainly no better than referees are today, and in many respects a lot worse, because they were nothing like as fit.
Yes.
But their mistakes just, you know, you
just accepted.
You forgot about them. You forgot about them.
Is the problem, Gareth, that some people cannot accept the inalienable truth that all human beings make some mistakes. You, Martyn, Chris and I among them. But and once you've accepted that there will be some mistakes, you will actually feel liberated and enjoy a game of rugby league a lot more.
Absolutely, I think that will play a part. I mean, we're lucky in our role in that I get to see 100 live games a season as a neutral, almost all of them. And you don't notice referees like people obviously do when they're watching their own club. So that for a starting point, I think if people watch more games as a neutral as opposed to their own club, they'd see a different game. But like you said, mistakes are made. Referees aren't biased, they don't have agendas. I can certainly vouch for the fitness thing. I spent a day training with them last year.
Great point. And just tell us a little bit about that, because I mean, we saw you puffing and blowing, and I'm thinking, Gareth's doing a lot better than I would be doing here, and yet you were finding it tough, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I'm a regular runner, so I thought I'd be all right with the running side of things, but the fitness levels were incredible. These guys are training as professional athletes, they're full-time athletes, really. But the level of detail they went into analysis afterwards was astounding to me, the video things, and people who think that they're not accountable for what happens in their games or that it's not reviewed, that is just not the case. If anything,
they're highly professional.
If our jobs were reviewed like they were, it would be incredibly stressful and not very possibly. And if you went to work every day and then you sat down in a room of your peers, which is what they do, and studied a detailed video analysis of how you perform, and people in the room were encouraged to criticise you, I think that would have a negative effect on a lot of people. These guys have to deal with that as well as the pressures of everything. It's an incredibly tough job, and I think they're doing it.
That was an excellent piece that Gareth did. It was, it was very revealing once you get in and amongst and get an understanding, which people on the terraces just don't get that insight that you've tried to provide.
Maybe we need a bit more insight, or maybe to give more people the opportunity to experience what you experience. But certainly when I was growing up, my father, who was an avid Wakefield fan, used to say that a good referee is one who favours Wakefield.
so times haven't really changed. I'll tell you what, which really does annoy me, because the punter in the stand is one thing, but clubs' official Twitter accounts that are making comment about referees, like Hull KR at the weekend, valiant effort from the Robins, but the game will be remembered for some very peculiar refereeing decisions. What's that about? St Helens, Lees flies in, hits the shoulder of the Salford defender, video ref chalks off try. Next tweet is about him being sent off. And then someone's obviously going to pop back about the tackle. Then they say, to be fair, it was typed as seen, i.e. before we'd seen the replay. Well, now why and they're not the only accounts. I've just picked them out from the weekend because there was things that had gone on. But why are clubs' Twitter accounts doing that?
I strongly disagree with them doing that. Now to me, a club's Twitter feed that's the club's representation of public, isn't it? When you're getting into that gut zone, it's kind of one person's opinion. Now, one person can't represent the opinion of St Helens or Wakefield to me, and opinion should be kept out of it. It should be factual, and it doesn't help this whole thing of let's get away from talking about referees and give them more respect. If clubs are almost actively encouraging people questioning the decisions constantly.
But that's a problem as well. If a problem, a lot of clubs now employ trained journalists to do that job and do the Twitter feeds as well. And I think there is too much time crossing boundaries into opinion when it should be just factual representation of what it is. But that is the club's voice. That's the club's voice up to the minute, and I think at times can inflame wrongly the situation.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on and talk about obstruction. It's kind of interlinked with the refereeing, but it's a separate topic in its own right. Now, I recall in 2014, I had to look it up just to make sure my memory was right. The obstruction debate had raised its head before because there was an absolute raft of them, and it reached a head in 2014 when Salford played Wigan, and 8 tries were referred to the video referee by Phil Bentham. The video ref was Ben Thaler, of which 5 were disallowed. And then, you remember, Martyn, I think you were there. We went up to the RL headquarters in Redhall when John Sharp was in charge. And I had great fun sort of rubbishing his figures. And
you've never been invited back again?
No, nothing like that. And we discussed obstruction. And I remember saying, look, obstruction is very simple. It's a player from the team attacking without the ball, obstructing a member of the defending team from making a genuine tackle on the ball carrier. Right, that's it. Right, and the referee is there to interpret that. That's it. He interprets all sorts of things during the match, and he uses his subjective judgment to judge whether a player was impeded and whether he would have made a genuine tackle on the ball carrier. Right, and they sort of went back to that, and now we're back to this, inside shoulder, outside shoulder, was there depth, did he run through the line, check sheet, that some poor old video refs there, like some driving instructor ticking things off.
Complicating it.
It's become ridiculous. In an effort to make it black and white, which they didn't need to do, it's become a farce, hasn't it? Again.
But it's another perfect example of a situation that needs some leadership from the RFL. You know, they need to clarify and explain and so on precisely why these decisions are being made now as they are. I mean, Wakefield were in touch with the RFL after their game against Castleford, and they're telling me that apparently Steve Ganson said to them that technically the decision was correct.
Well, it probably
not to allow Max Jowett's try.
But it's not an obstruction in any way, shape or form that we know it as an obstruction.
But it's because the guidelines themselves need amending in the way that you've just suggested.
But Martin, the guidelines keeps being shifted all the time. And it's the system
and we're never told publicly when
and we're never told publicly.
No, that's the problem.
So to be honest, they were operating the guidelines and allowing, you know, not on a black and white basis and kind of making a proper judgment. And the proper judgment, and Ian Smith, former video referee, tweeted this well in his humble opinion, it would have been a try. And to be honest, just looking at it, it wasn't just a try, it was a great try.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that sticks in the craw, really. But in its own way, because of the guidelines, the video referee made the correct decision. Yeah, but the guidelines are rubbish.
Well, isn't the root of it all this thing that this ridiculous demand for consistency from human beings, which is just completely impossible? So they come in with these black and white things like inside shoulder, outside shoulder, depth through the line, and that takes away the subjective judgment of the referee because he's the arbiter. Why don't you just leave it to the ref?
I agree. Yeah, there's two worrying byproducts of this. You just sat listening to this, how complicated it is for four guys who watch rugby league on a regular basis, speak to people in the game. If you're sat down watching that on a Friday night the first time and you're trying to explain or understand why that's been disallowed, that's a negative for the game. And what's also a negative for the game is if players in the defensive line are now looking for these situations,
that's the thing.
And that is cropping up a bit as well.
There's another negative, Gareth.
Absolutely.
There's another negative, and that is that the fans in the stadium are being gradually, you know, alienated, no doubt about it. And, you know, people are just going away from the ground feeling very dissatisfied.
Well, Gareth made a good point there about players in the defensive line, giving it the full Laurence Olivier BAFTA award winner, you know, fling yourself on the floor. Steve Ganson was saying that there's an increase in this kind of players using, let's call it gamesmanship, you might call it dark arts, but sort of legitimately using the rules and bending them to your advantage. Is that true?
Yeah, because you saw it in the Catalans game at the weekend as well. Jake Connor kind of throwing his arms up as well. It looked to me, Tony Gigot, I thought, scored a legitimate try, and that one got shorts off.
That's a very interesting one, because on that occasion when Gigot scored, he actually beat several players to score. But if you look closely at it, I got the feeling that Scott Taylor almost deliberately decided not to tackle Gigot in order to go to the video ref to have the try turned down, which was smart thinking if that's what Scott did.
And this is creeping in other aspects.
But again, it's a negative, really, for the game.
You know, the Wigan-Leeds game, and I remember tweeting that you know, Sam Powell was smart to stay down after he got clocked round the head because the video ref would look at it and they get a penalty. And at the other end, Stevie Ward got hit with a high tackle, but carried on and didn't go down and didn't get a penalty because the video ref didn't look at it. So the more that happens, the more that players will.
And it's always been a sport that's prided itself on getting away from that and being the exact opposite of that. If everything
we've criticised football for years, haven't we?
That kind of play, to go back to that Wakefield try, that's just the kind of play you want to see. It was a super try. Bill Tupou ran a great line, and out the back, they some great hands, and it was a super try. You just go, wow, that's great. What?
Right.
It was. You could, anybody would be incredulous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that. It's madness.
The forensic analysis of sport in many facets is linked in, which is that what you're talking about, is linked into having a video referee. Now, the video referee itself, because of the obstruction, is now coming under scrutiny. And everyone knows I am the UK's biggest campaigner against video refereeing, and saying it should be scrapped in every sport that it's ever polluted. Martin, I think you're coming around to my point of view. I'm delighted to have you on board in the campaign. I should probably make you the on-sec. Just explain why you're coming around to that point of view, that you should just go back to letting the ref and get on with it.
Because I think the video referee, the way it's evolved, it's taken on too wide a role. And it's now at the point that we're seeing regularly, whereby, as Chris said, it's disqualifying some spectacular play and spectacular tries. And that's not really what it should be there for. And when it comes to obstruction, you can't. You're trying to read the mind of a player. You're trying to determine whether that player would or would not have got across to make that tackle. You can't know that for sure. So why allow the video referee to make decisions on that basis?
Well,
because I'm fairly sure, obviously that try was given by Hicks, the referee.
And in a non-television game,
it would have
stood.
It would have stood, yeah.
And anywhere else on the field, if that play is run and there's no try scored, it's probably play on as well, isn't it? It's only when a try is scored that we'd call it into question.
Since 1996.
Yeah.
And going back to all those years, I remember writing about it at the time when it came in. Great idea to have the system, but if it's not at all games, there's no level playing field.
Yeah.
And that's been the case for the last 22 years.
And almost now, again, going back to, we get to see a lot of games and most of them are televised, but I look forward to my Sunday afternoon games now where there's no video referee.
Yes.
Yeah.
There isn't the stoppages in play, and it almost feels like you're free watching the game.
And it doesn't take 2 hours or over to play the game.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the video ref started off by coming in just to look at grounding in touch, but of course the weed grows because...
Well, it's the mission creep, isn't it?
The mission creep, there was a knock-on in back play, and then you use it for foul play, and then you want to use it for who actually put the ball in touch.
But then you saw... remember the Magic Weekend in 2007 where words in ears and all the rest of it, and it is that mission creep, and we've just got way too far. I think if you got back to the thing about, just over the goal line, then maybe you've got...
that would be my preference, the ground in, the touch, and maybe
You've
offside
got
from
goal
kicks.
maybe just for that, though, haven't you?
Offside as well,
You should be able to see it.
Yeah, but then you've got a situation whereby the video referee will say, yes, he grounded the ball, but there was a knock-on in the previous tackle, which I can't tell you about. And everyone watching on television go, well, this is absurd, we've got the technology, why aren't we using it?
It was against St Helens and Rosie Road.
You'll have to go
we went back 6 tackles, went back about 5 minutes to go.
Yes, we
Do
did.
you remember the try that Catalan scored at St Helens, the Millard try, the famous miracle play when they drew the game, not Rosie Road, at Lantry Park, sorry, obviously they had to review every facet of it, where there was about 15 passes, 3 kicks, an air shot, and all sorts, and that just took the whole joy of that magnificent moment.
So by the time they gave the decision, Millard had forgotten he'd scored.
Yes, I think everyone had left the ground. So very quickly, we've established that the obstruction law needs to go back to something much more basic and subjective by the referee. Should the video referee now be completely scrapped and everything as you enjoy on a Sunday, Gareth, with the referee making decisions and we all go home and enjoy it?
I still think there's an argument for ground in touch and offside from kicks, and that has to be strictly it. I know you've said that people will criticise it, but I think if you keep it strictly to that, I think there's still a run.
I'm definitely joining your party.
I'm with Gareth, but if you're going to do that, and I don't think there is the money to do it, it has to be at all games.
Well, they did experiment with it at all games.
Well, they had a couple of cameras, the Hull KL
versus Hull,
and then
but
nothing
the clubs
happened.
wouldn't fund the rest of the operation, unfortunately, so they couldn't do it. We'll see how it pans out. I'm sure something will happen on the obstruction, because otherwise the next round of matches we're going to be having the same conversation here.
Are you sure? Are the RFL listening, Rob? Are they listening?
Who knows?
I don't know. Listen, what we are going to be talking about, actually, finally, in a couple of minutes' time, is actually what happened on the field of play in the last week, and there was some exciting rugby league and a coaching appointment at Huddersfield, and we'll be chatting about that in a couple of minutes here on Rugby League Back Chat. Welcome back to the third and final part of Rugby League Back Chat. We're here at the Arc in Headingley. Well, earlier this week, Huddersfield Giants found their new coach. He will be Simon Woolford, the 43-year-old Australian. He's left the Newcastle Knights, where he was assisting Nathan Brown, and signed a 2.5-year contract at the Giants. We recall that Rick Stone was sacked in March of this year, having spent just under 2 years at the club. What do you make of the appointment, Martin? And they are literally bottom of the league.
Well, there's only one way to go, isn't
There
there?
is.
And that's
Into the
up,
Championship.
and
No, seriously.
I spoke to Simon Wolford at the weekend and made that point to him. I think he appreciated it, or at least I hope he did. But it's interesting. This is his first head coaching job, and you never quite know how somebody's going to go until they actually occupy that role. As a player, he played for 12 years at Canberra Raiders. He actually played for coaches like Craig Bellamy, as in the President's Cup. He played for Tim Sheens. He played for Mal Meninga. Played for Matthew Elliott, of course, who we remember from his Bradford days. Then he played for Nathan Brown at St George. So he's played for some great coaches, and if he's capable of learning from some of those people, then you would hope that it'd be a really great appointment for Huddersfield. I mean, who knows how it's going to go. He's made the point, I think, to us that he can't really make many changes this year even if he thinks that the changes are needed. So he's going to have to work with the squad he's got. And I think he's going to have to rely on a lot of players coming back from injury and so on, because they've had a lot of problems this year, as have clubs like Widnes. Right. So injuries play a very important part in the modern game, with limited squad numbers and so on. So from speaking to him, he gave me a pretty high degree of confidence. I think that he's focused and he knows what he's doing, and he's obviously spoken to Nathan Brown. He's obviously spoken to Rick Stone as well. He actually had a long chat with Rick, and Rick, he said, was very complimentary about the club, which was very nice to hear. So we've got to give him a chance and hope he can deliver the goods.
They've been in and amongst the bottom four for 3 seasons, haven't they? They had a dalliance with the middle eights a couple of years back. Last year they avoided it by the skin of their teeth after a mid-season rally. They're on 5 points. Salford, who are 8th, are on 10, and their points difference Huddersfield is, I've got to check I'm reading this right, minus 249. Minus 249. Right, so their chances of, I would think, of getting out of the bottom four are minimal. So it's now going to be, can they win a battle in the middle eights?
They've got 10 games in the regular season.
They've got 10.
10 games, and they are they're 5 points off the.
We've got at least 3 of them to get to where Salford are now.
Correct. Yeah. So it's already looking mission improbable for Wolford. I mean, obviously that's going to be the aim, is to squeeze into top 8, as Rick Stone did with the Giants last year, got them out of that, extricated themselves from that bottom 4. But you've got to think at this stage, more than halfway through the regular season, that they are going to be part of the qualifiers and probably have to prepare on that basis for that kind of fight. And there are clubs in there who are steeled in that kind of dogfight, and that's what the qualifiers is, a dogfight, really.
He's going to have to pull a few things together, isn't he? I think they've got some experienced players right at the back end of the career, like Hinchcliffe and Brough. Then they've got some really, really talented youngsters that have had some experience in the last few weeks under Chris Thorman. It just seems that it all needs pulling together. It needs a coach to galvanise that club and the team. Let me ask you this, because the most important person at any sports club is the person that recruits the players. Never mind the coach. They could you could put Wayne Bennett in charge, and it might make some difference, but not much. So has their recruitment been poor?
It's not just recruitment; it's decisions about which players to let go. And
right. Okay. Fair enough.
In our newspaper a week or two ago, I actually listed the players who have left Huddersfield since they won the League Leaders' Shield in 2013.
Yes.
And in almost every case, they've gone on to play well at the clubs that they've joined after leaving Huddersfield. Probably about 8 to 10 of them. Players like Jake Connor, for example, who never really wanted to leave Huddersfield.
No, there was all sorts of wrangling about that, wasn't
there? There was, and but he did go in the end, and he's making a terrific contribution at Hull now. But the thing, I mean, they won that League Leaders' Shield 5 years ago and didn't build on it. And I've got a slightly controversial view of where things started to go wrong, because I think it was when Paul Anderson, the then coach, sacked Danny Brough as the captain. It was one of Danny's indiscretions. He'd gone for a beer when he shouldn't have done, or whatever it was. And Danny is one of those guys who will, sometimes behave, a bit erratically, I guess. But in terms of his knowledge of the game and his captaincy, he's the sort of guy you make him the captain and he will give leadership and really, try 100% for the club. Take that away from him and I don't think he's as effective. So, my advice to Simon Woolford, for what it's worth, and I suppose he may not follow this, is to give Brough back the captaincy, because if anybody's going to lead Huddersfield out of trouble, it will be Brough.
Well, there's an alternative view to that, which I've heard from several people, is that they should have got rid of Brough.
Well, you either do one or the other.
Right.
I think that is a valid view.
Should they get rid of Brough?
Not now, I don't think. I think they need him now more than ever.
Yeah.
Between now and the end of the season, and they need leaders, and they need.
And they have
I mean,
got McGilvery to come back. I mean, crikey.
And Kudjos, well, they have missed some big players through in the haven't they? But it does need somebody to pull it together at the right time.
There's been a sense of drift at Huddersfield for quite a long time now, and unfortunately Chris Thorman kind of had to pick up the poison chalice, and it's been very, very difficult for him and the players left. And
they've had 5 games of which they've won none, drawn 1 and lost 4.
Yeah, it's been poor.
Yeah.
It's been poor. But they've had no luck. They've had really bad luck. And they need something to go their way. But it needs to happen quickly. I mean, there's a visa issue, isn't there, as well, Woolford, at the moment. I'm not sure when he's coming in.
Well, the talk was that Thorman would still be in charge when they play Widnes this weekend.
And then it's the cup. And then it's the cup afterwards.
I actually think they'll win. And they then play Wakefield in the cup.
Yeah.
Which, frankly, is of no consequence to them, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, they're almost better out of it, aren't they?
They're going to get thrown into a qualifiers campaign that's going to be the most competitive yet, I think.
For Woolford, it's really going to start properly at the Magic Weekend, isn't it? That's where it's really going to start.
Yeah, it will start properly there. But maybe it'll have the same impact as when Justin Holbrook came in.
45-0. 45-0 against Hull.
Forget that.
45-0, what an impact that was from Justin Holbrook. At the bottom there, I remember a few weeks ago we were saying it was like musical chairs with 5 of them, and who would have a seat in the top 8 when the music stopped. Well, at the moment, the band is still playing on, and the band played on, but Salford have sort of like got themselves nicely positioned in a comfy armchair, a few points ahead of this bottom 4: Widnes, Hull KR, Catalan and Huddersfield. Is this? It's not done, but is it almost done?
Yeah,
No.
I mean, Wakefield have dropped into it a bit as well, haven't they, with a run of fairly poor results.
But they'll beat the teams below them, won't they?
You'd have thought so, yeah.
It's a big few weeks now, isn't it? Whether there's going to be a big gap there or whether someone gets dragged into it. I think the next 3-4 weeks are massive for those clubs.
Yeah. And the top, Warrington have had a really fantastic run, and they'll have a bit of an acid test at Leeds this weekend. How do you see the top man? St Helens and Wigan appear, in my view, to be the best 2 teams, followed by not much between Warrington, Castleford and Leeds, and Hull have dropped off the pace a bit.
Well, I think all those 4 are contenders for the top 4 places. I think you're right. Saints and Wigan look likely to me to be the runaway leaders, the way things are going at the moment. And when they play each other again, that's going to be absolutely massive. But I wouldn't like to say which other 2 teams are going to be in the top 4 at the end of the day. Although, of course, you never like to bet against Leeds, do you?
What Warrington have improved markedly.
Not with any profitability.
No, quite a lot of Warrington this year. And when Warrington set off, they were slow starters. They were pretty uninspiring. But then when they played Bradford in the other week, John Keir made a couple of great points about they sorted the defence out, built from that, and now they're playing expansive. Josh Charnley's scoring tries for fun. They're on the rise, definitely on the rise.
Signing of the year, Josh Charnley, isn't he?
But also signing for Warrington, Bryson Goodwin. I think he's had a tremendous season. He's been brilliant.
Yeah.
Hull have dropped off the pace, so they've now lost 6 matches.
But they're coming into the cup. It's cup time.
We're coming to cup time, and they play Featherstone in that. I keep getting told by Hull supporters that they peak at the right time. Well, they're going to have to do some peaking before the right time here, because otherwise they won't be in a position to peak, will they?
And that's the nature of the shorter season, isn't it? 6 defeats even in a 23-game season. They're going to have to. They can't afford many more defeats now, can they? I don't think certainly in the regular league season.
The problem for Hull, in a way, is that if you look at the way the end of season works, if you're in the middle 8, you all start from 0 points. If you're in the top 8, your points carry forward. So you can't afford to relax, really. I mean, once a team knows it's going to be in the bottom 4 in Super League, its results don't matter that much, really, before it gets to the middle 8, because what's really crucial for them, and this is why the current structure has such a weakness, because a club such as, for example, Huddersfield Giants, who's been talking about, if they decide that they're not going to make the top 8, then their focus has got to be on the middle 8. The 10 games or so that are going to come up in the next few weeks are going to be irrelevant largely for them.
Well, the system creates a situation where the most important game is 8th versus 9th.
Yes.
To avoid getting into the bottom thing, and when it really ought to be 1st versus 2nd, obviously. But in any regard, let's just move out of Super League for a minute, because Gareth, we know, is an absolute connoisseur of the Championship and League One, where this week in League One we had a record-breaking score where York put 144-0 whitewash of West Wales. I think Kieran Moss scored 7 tries, didn't he? Of their 25.
Yeah, staggering figures.
In some ways, it's kind of like it's a headline grabber, but is it something you think, oh, that's not great?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say it's not great, is it, for anybody? That I don't think. It's not good for York, although they've got this world record tag now. It's certainly not good for West Wales. I'd just like to go into bat for West Wales on a couple of points, really. One, I look back at the example of Newcastle Thunder, who were then Gateshead. So in 2010, they lost 132-0 to the now defunct Blackpool. Yes. That year, they also shipped 100 points at Batley. They shipped 90-odd at Swinton and conceded over 17 times that year. Now, they were allowed to carry on, build, and now they made the playoffs last year. Newcastle Thunder regularly get crowds of close to 1,000, have a junior setup, and are being talked about as a possible championship club. So there is a way they can come back, first of all. Second of all, I've heard people say that they should just cast West Wales off now and forget about them. The example I'd use against that is in the other code through Neil Kelly, the Dewsbury coach. When he was in rugby union, Namibia, the national Namibian side, the Rugby Union International Board recruited Neil Kelly specifically because they'd conceded 145 points in a World Cup against New Zealand. They got somebody in there to go and help them and said, look, your job is to sort this defence out and it won't happen again next World Cup. Why shouldn't Rugby League take that kind of attitude and say what they actually need is help? Not everybody's saying, let's get rid of him. Send some people in there and give them a hand to develop the game in that area of the country.
Yes, I mean, we've already got rid of clubs at Oxford and Gloucester. Should we throw West Wales out as well? And, you know, the expansion policy would really look a complete shambles then, wouldn't it? Let's face it. I think we need a foothold in South Wales. Clearly not good enough at the moment. But, you know, there's great rugby talent in South Wales. We just need some of it, or enough of it, coming into rugby league. And the funny thing is that the Welsh junior level teams, I think the Welsh under-16 team, last year beat England, didn't they? Yeah. So there's the potential for young players.
But you know this, Martin, probably better than anyone. Wales has always been a huge source for rugby league of talent. In the old days when you got, and it still is. Look at Regan Grace at St Helens. It is, and we've got to stick by it because that is a hotbed of rugby.
I hate to say this, but it could be a short-lived world record, couldn't it? Because their next fixture is Bradford Bulls away.
Yeah.
They're in a very tough situation.
Very interesting to see how bookmakers handicap that match.
Well, John Kerr will be looking to possibly beat 1-4-4.
Will Bradford actually?
They played them in the cup, didn't they? And scored 80 something.
Will they?
Not so long ago.
Will they rest? Will they field a weakened team? Bradford.
I think with clubs like West Wales as well, their team can vary from week to week with players. So it could be a different team. So, but I just think this is an example where we should say, let's help them. Let's not cast them aside. Let's send somebody in there to do it.
Because what you're talking there leads on to the whole structure debate. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. We still don't even know what on earth's happening in rugby league in 2019, and it's early May now. Gareth, there was another meeting this week, wasn't there? Super Clubs led by Ian Lenigan. You know, we know he's been flexing their muscles over the closed season and into this season about the new structure and the funding of the game. And they were meeting with clubs from other leagues, other divisions, weren't they, this week? I know you've spoken to a few people. What can you tell us?
So as I understand it, there was 4 Super League chairmen who presented to the clubs, which was Ian Lenigan, Adam Pearson at Hull, Neil Hudgell, Hull KR, and Eamon McManus at St Helens. However, there wasn't any formal proposals put forward this time. There was talk of a need for change, talk of to have a look at how funding structure and things, but the rest of the clubs haven't been given any of this 2 leagues of 10 or sweeping changes proposals yet. That will happen in coming weeks in smaller working groups between the competitions. We should know a bit more then.
As I understand it, Ian Lenigan has backpedalled a bit on this business of taking away the funding from the League One clubs. You know, the League One clubs all get £75,000.
Backpedal from the letter that he...
I believe so, yes, at the meeting. I think Ian, you know, has been pulled back a bit by the other people you just mentioned.
They're quite united, aren't they? The non-Super League clubs are very united.
And I think they are, you know, looking at the way the money that comes into rugby league is spent, and I think that's perfectly logical and sensible. But, you know, the idea that all these, you know, the 14 clubs in League One should have the funding removed and revert to being amateur in effect is crazy, and I think people are beginning to realise that.
Can't we at least get some consistency and say, look, okay, if they can't reach any agreement at this stage, at least say, look, for 2019 we stay as we are.
I think that's
they will
what's
do,
going to
won't they?
happen.
They will do,
That's got
but
to
why
happen.
don't they come out and say so? I mean, that's the worry with a lot of clubs. They just don't know. We just do not know. And
Right.
It's crazy.
Well, we will find out, Martin. We've run out of time. We don't know, but we will know eventually, no doubt. What we do know is what's coming up on Premier Sports this week. Toronto Wolfpack continue their championship campaign against Swinton Lions. That's on Saturday, May the 5th at 9:30 p.m. And for all the forthcoming action right here on this channel, go to www.freesports.tv. And we will be back at the Arc in 2 weeks when we'll be joined by the Hull KR chairman, Neil Hudgell, Mark Campbell, the Featherstone Rovers chairman, and it's sure to be a feisty debate and definitely not one to be missed. Until then, it's goodbye from our guests, Chris Irvine from The Times, Gareth Walker from the Daily Mirror, and Martyn Sadler, the League Express editor. Hope you'll join us in a couple of weeks. Thanks for joining us on Rugby League Back Chat.